Welcome to the Age UK Isle of Wight podcast, featuring Island Voices, brought to you today by Claire Shortman in association with Slingshot Records.
Hi, I'm Claire Shortman, Age UK Isle of Wight, and today we're creating a podcast with Marilyn. Hi Marilyn, thank you ever so much for talking to us.
And thank you for coming to see me and to talk to me. And I live in a manor in Cowes, or in between Cowes and Gurnard. I've lived here for 35 years, but of course the house, part of which is 500 years old, has loads of history to it, and there are so many books and leaflets written on it, the whole area, that I won't go into it. Specific things maybe, but part of it here was a dispensary for Dr. Hofmeister, which is along in the passage, and then the servants' quarters were adjoined to that.
Yes.
And his wife lived here. She hated him smoking, so in which is our kitchen, that was his smoking room, and he was banned into there when he was wanting his pipe, and he also wore a hat with like a fez with a tassel on it, and there were pictures of him when he was in there smoking. But now it's my kitchen, and I very rarely go in there now because I have carers looking after me.
When you first moved here,
Yes.
when you came here, what was it like? Tell us about the house that you bought and what it was like around here.
Well, when we moved here, not really. I say it was a solicitor who lived here.
Okay.
There was no bungalow opposite. There was the pond, which is a dew pond, enlisted, and there was a copse here.
Okay.
And we live here. We would love to have bought all of that, but of course it was already sold. We didn't know what was going to happen to it, but now we have 3 large houses there, 1 bungalow over there. My daughter lives adjoined here, in which was the coachman's cottage, and next to that is the stable, which is full of all my odds and ends.
Okay. So, the changes, you talked about the house comes with such a history as well. This was originally, did you say, part of an estate?
Part of the Ward estate.
Yes. Yeah.
And when I was young, we always used to say on a Sunday morning we were going to go for a walk round the walls, and the walls, a lot of which are still here, stone built, that completely encircle the Ward estate. And Northwood House was Northwood House, and the Wards lived there. And prior to that, I believe, lived in Egypt House.
Yes. All
of which are entirely being ruined by housing built in and around them, their grounds.
So are you Ireland born and bred?
No, I was born on the mainland.
Okay. Which part of the mainland?
Wiltshire.
Wiltshire.
Okay. And yes, I went to school, and Diana Dawes was in high school.
Oh really?
No way.
Yes, yes. It's so strange. And just before war started, yes, good time, we went to live in Belgium, where my father worked, and we stayed there until just before war began. And when we came back, friends of ours were torpedoed, and it was... But I can remember it all so plainly, because before that we lived in Gurnard.
Okay.
And latterly I had an antique shop there, and then I had 2 antique shops in Newport.
Okay.
That was some time ago. But now I'm nearly 90, and that's all behind me. Next month.
I'm sure you've still got some antiques.
I'm the antique.
So what did your father do in Belgium? What was that?
He was an engineer.
Okay.
Yes. And we first of all went there for a few days to see what we thought of it.
Mm-hmm.
And although he was sure that war was going to be coming, we still went, and then we came back either to Charleroi, which was an engineering town at the time. And then from there we came to the island because my mother's sister lived in Gurnard, and my father thought it would be safer.
Okay. Even though during the war, I gather there were still issues here as well.
Yes.
Do you remember any of those? Are there any of those moments that you remember?
In the war? Yes, I can remember we had a dugout shelter in the garden. It was under an apple tree, and my father, when there was bombing and what have you, my father would stand in the doorway in this dugout shelter, and my mother used to take food down there for us, and one day she took a flask of, I think it was cocoa or coffee or something, and she, when the raid was over, we carefully shone a torch, or my father did, into the cup, because she said it's so bitty, and the cup was full of ants. These are the many hazards of the war. My father would stand in the war. When there was the raid on cows, we could hear the guns go, the Bofors gun and all the, what did they call it when they were paying back? Bofors guns, I think. And there was a gun down on the, by the Woodvale Hotel. We had soldiers, American GIs, who stayed with us, and Shorty and Robbie, and both of them were killed. Yes, at Dieppe. One of the, yes.
Can to try and lighten it a bit, why was Shorty called Shorty?
I presume because he was shorter than Robbie.
I thought he was going to be really tall. I thought I had this imagery.
No, he was short.
Yeah, but my husband is known as Shorty, and that's because of our surname. So
I never. Yes, yes.
So do you remember because it was a Polish warship?
Yes, Bletsko-Wiska.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I do.
Oh, wow.
That saved us.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
That was an incredible event.
Oh, the Poles were marvellous.
Yeah.
Yes. There were so many things to remind you of the war. The music, Glenn Miller, even now.
Did you dance?
Well, I was a bit young at
I know.
the time.
I know.
How would I have been? If I was born in 1932, and war was 40, wasn't it, roughly?
Yeah, 39, so you were 7 when it broke out. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
But no, we still used to, as children, dance around. But a funny thing happened, and I don't know whether I should say this, but we had the ARP people, the wardens behind us, behind my aunt's house. This was in the old bakery at Gurnard, that's by the church, and behind the Portland Hotel, which now is, all which were different. And a lady came to the house that we knew that lived down the road, and when she went, my mother went out into the garden, and she found this long white thing there, and she thought, secret weapon. It's obviously something that we've got to, watch out for. And so she asked my aunt to get some tongs, coal tongs for the fire, and my aunt went out and picked this up very gingerly, and they put it in a bag and took it round to the air warden's hut. And later that day, Mrs. Powell, who lived down the road, she said, Mrs. Bearer, that was my aunt, she said, I hate to tell you, but she said, I dropped a Tampax here in the So my mother and my aunt could never look at the ARP then again. And then we had, when we lived down the road in the vineries, we had sea mines that landed here.
Okay.
And I mean, when you think of atomic bombs, this was peanuts. But it landed behind the aeroborne and all the chickens were killed and they were all dead, unfortunately, all in the trees and things. And for a little village, we did have things happening. Yes, yeah. And I can remember going to the neighbour's house and there was a raid and all the shrapnel was dropping in bits all around the road. And I think one lady in Solanview Road, I don't know whether she was killed, but I know forevermore she had this great big hole in her leg where one had landed in the garden and something, the metalwork, had, you know, damaged her leg. But so many things happened in the war, you know. It's only when you see all these programmes on television that it suddenly brings it back to you. But I realised that I wasn't frightened.
Okay.
Oh.
I was too young.
Yes.
And when the Spitfires and the Messerschmitts were fighting overhead, we used to think this was wonderful, and we'd stand out there and if you could see one coming down, you could see it spiralling. If it was a Messerschmitt or whatever they were, we used to cheer and clap, it's one of theirs coming. Of course, at that age, you didn't realise that it was men's, women's husbands, fathers, wives. Terrible.
We spoke to a gentleman called Pat yesterday.
Pat?
Who was living in, he'd been to Holland.
Oh, yes.
And he was very moved by the fact that he had friends who had experienced being invaded and taken over and having their country taken over. And he was from Belfast, wasn't he? Just in Enniskillen originally. But he said that was his favourite place to go because he just felt so welcomed, and he'd worked for the army for quite a time. But he said that he talked to us. He said we both left that meeting thinking we don't really understand because we've never really experienced it. We don't know. My parents have always brought me up to understand from a second-hand understanding. But how we should never ever get back to that again, and how you have to fight fascism at every turn and stop that. And I think we're a very privileged generation to have not experienced that. But talking to you now and just saying that's reality, isn't it?
Yes.
Watching people die, but not quite understanding or seeing that was a distance from it. So.
And because I was an only child. Probably like so many, and food was short. Yeah. My mother made sure, you know, that I'd never seen a banana, couldn't remember what a banana looked like, and we kept chickens, and my mother used to put down eggs in isinglass to keep the so we never went short of eggs. Okay. And meat and things like that, but other things, no, it was the older people that suffered. As children, perhaps I can't say we glorified it, it was the exciting time. And I know when war was declared, my mother and father sent me out into the garden. They didn't want me to hear Mr. Chamberlain saying, you know, that Hitler was going to put, I can't think of the word, he wouldn't accept this decree, that was war. But again... That
was a warm, sunny day, as I remember reading about, So it was a very strange...
Very strange.
Because it's like this, but then something horrible is happening and coming.